Hey, welcome back, nerds. Fino here with the guide/commentary for the Achilles exhibition quest. This one can be quite rough depending on your roster because the pool of valid servants to do it is very restrictive. So right off the bat, Achilles comes at you with massive damage resistance. He has one buff for normal attacks and another for NP damage. The one against normal attacks actually gets weaker when you fight him with divine servants. So that's the first bottleneck. You need a divine attacker. Unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as just running Kama and calling it a day. But we'll get to that. First of all, to start the actual fight, you need to break this first bar with his damage buffs up. For my part, I've decided to run Kualter. He fits the divine mold, and he has a strong defensive suite, which you're gonna need in phase 2. Early on, it's slow going, but Achilles himself doesn't really... He doesn't threaten you too much. Again, if you're running casters, they're going to take hits, which isn't great, but... This is where the trouble starts. So, at this point, Achilles starts off by buffing himself like crazy. I actually lucked out here because he didn't crit me. He has substantial crit buffs, like huge, ridiculous crit buffs. And if at all possible, you need to either suppress them or purge them. Purging them is actually doable because there is a command code called Dove Report, and it removes the crit damage buff and actually nerfs his crit chance, which is really nice. Here, I have to scum because, yeah, I didn't deal with the crit buff well enough and Merlin died, which is no good. I'm going to need him. Not for the reasons that you'd think, but he is quite handy here. Not essential, but... you know, gives a lot of consistency. I'll also point out that on top of those crit buffs, which are removable, he has a pair of unremovable buffs. One of them gives him 40% charm resistance, which is not insurmountable, but servants that charm aren't really servants that you'd be wanting to run for this fight anyway. The other is a buff that gives him enmity, so the lower his health, the more damage he does. So essentially when you're about to kill him, you should just burn him down as quickly as possible. Or lock him up so he can't DPS you. Now, the core mechanic of this fight is that Achilles will start issuing dual challenges if there's a valid target on the board. Now, he's actually quite picky about who he'll challenge to a fight. So right off the bat, he won't challenge women. So if you're trying to beat him with Penthesilea, I'm sorry to say it's not going to work. I mean, you know, you can have her along, but she will not be able to duel him face to face. So first of all, he won't target women. Second of all, he will not challenge assassins or casters. Casters, that actually works out in your favor, because it means he won't like challenge a waiver to a contest in the bedroom or something. But it does mean you can't run servants like First Hassan, which he isn't divine, but he'd be able to brawl pretty well. You also can't run, yeah, another reason why Kama doesn't really work that well here. So yeah, that's what I meant when I said the pool of servants for this fight is extremely restrictive. So as you can see, after issuing the challenge, a turn after issuing the challenge, he'll lock you in a 1v1. Whichever servant he picks against himself. He won't use his NP, and he won't use skills, but neither can you. As you can see, the rest of your servants are stunned, and you only have access to your main attacker's command cards, which is nice, but it does stop you from using one-turn mitigations in this fight. So, the kinds of protection you want are multi-turn buffs. You want defense buffs, you want hit-based evades. But yeah, as you can see, Ku is taking some serious fucking damage here. Like, your main attacker... It's a tricky balance, because your main attacker needs to be robust enough to actually last 2 turns against Achilles. Because that's, you know, that's when he drops the challenge. But they also need to be able to actually deal damage and be divine and male or unknown. We'll get to that. But yeah, and also not an assassin or a caster. So the pool of servants that actually works for this, I can actually list them right here. Heracles, divine, male, all buster cards. Kintoki, divine, male, ton of buster cards. Kualter, who's probably the best choice for your main DPS. And Arjuna Alter. Arjuna Alter is, he works of course, but it's not as much of a slam dunk as you might expect. Because his defensive kit isn't really well suited for this fight. And he will have to actually sit there in 1v1 Achilles. So that can be quite rough unless you come prepared. Maybe Ashwataman can do it. The problem is he doesn't have class advantage, like any kind of extra damage in a DPS contest. I tried to do a test run with him. I'm pretty sure you need him at 10-10-10 to actually do it. To have, like, good enough cooldowns to do it. So, take that as you will. Finally, there's Mothman. Mothman is not divine. At least he's not listed among the divine servants. But you may be able to win a war of attrition anyway. So if you are in need of a finisher, he can actually work in that role. Because if all you need to do is just trade face cards and ride off of, you know, NP gain from enemies hitting you, maybe you can make something work. But yeah, so the flow of this fight is that you spend 2 turns just fending off Achilles with your whole team and hoping he doesn't crit your casters down. Then you spend 2 turns in a 1v1. And then you rinse and repeat. And every now and then he will NP, because he's still gaining charge throughout this process. Healing is nice. I'm not sure how many turns it actually ends up buying me. But you do want to keep your frontline alive as long as possible. And another trick you can do here, just to keep things going, is you can actually just wait until the turn that he issues the challenge to use all your buffs. The timing here actually works out quite well because he's about to NP the turn before his challenge, which lets me screen the whole team. And null his NP. So again, good time to build resources, use any non-damaging NPs you have, or damaging NPs you have. I mean, you're going to get a lot of charge just from fighting him, and you can't NP during the duels, so, you know, smoke him if you got him. Thankfully, Achilles' base kit is not a huge obstacle. Like, you saw him use the invuln there, but he's not going to use it during the duel. So you can take care of it before then. I think the most threatening thing you can do is actually to pop his quick and crit buff. That kind of sucks, but you can handle it. There's a little bit of RNG involved in this strategy. Well, the Kualter strategy. Because you can gain a free turn if he decides to use a skill instead of a third attack. Or, if you have enough defense buffs up, you can make do either way, like you just saw there. Your Mystic code choice actually matters a fair bit in this fight, because Achilles will actually do you a solid and reduce the cooldowns of your master skills during the duels. So, using things like Atlas to invuln during the duels and to reduce cooldowns outside of them, it actually works quite well. The cleanse you won't be getting that much mileage out of because you really don't want to cleanse the duel challenge. You have a pretty limited amount of time to finish this fight, and you don't want to necessarily waste it throwing yourself against his damage resistance buffs. It is actually possible to force him to taunt female and like assassins and stuff like that. The thing is, though, well, A, you need a taunt to do it, so, you know, that's its own can of worms. But B, the issue is that he'll just revoke the challenge anyway, like a turn later, and you've wasted time. So it's not really worth doing. You can't cheese that. Also, if you're trying to do this fight without having any applicable challenge targets, you can't do that either. I don't think it's feasible, because what he will do is he will start fully charging himself and gaining a nasty crit buff. So if you run out of valid targets, you lose, because he'll just NP you down. For my finisher in this fight, I opted to run Kintoki. It's quite risky because Kintoki has no inbuilt protection, but what makes him nice is that he can actually fish for stuns with Golden Spark, something he's not going to be using anyway during the duels themselves. He has a ridiculously high attack stat. Yeah, your DPS is critically important. One way you can actually swing this fight is to equip your servants with Fragment of 2030, or some other passive star generation effect. Merlin can do it with Garden of Avalon. That's like the real benefit. That and the health you get from hero creation. And the invuln. Like, you're not necessarily doing it for, like, the really sexy, like, Merlin Buster crits. You're doing it for the survivability. Yeah, if you need other suggestions, like, for supporters, you can run Hans. The problem with Hans is that he has a tendency to explode just out of nowhere from the damage he's taking. So he's risky, but he can generate a lot of stars and a lot of value. So if you can screen for him properly with mash and stuff, you can make it work. As you can see, even with Achilles' damage reduction, he's taking a ton of damage from Golden Spark. So you can actually chip him down even when that's going on. So here, I managed to get the Invuln back in time, so I used that on Kintoki. It'll buy me a turn. The Guts will also buy me a turn. Otherwise, yeah, your best bet is to just borrow Coup Alter and to protect him the best you can. And to purge the crit buff at the start of phase 2, remember, very important. Yeah, it's a rough fight. I'm not terribly fond of the restrictions on this one, but it is doable. So if you're having trouble, just find a Coup Alter, although try not to find one that has too many cleanse codes. I ran into that problem, and it made the fight pretty much unwinnable in one of my test runs. And yeah, as you can see, Kintoki does it. But yeah, that said, I hope you found this useful. Like if you liked the video, subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time. Peace.